Are you thinking about going to law school? If so, you need to watch this video. In it, I'm going to break down for you what the most common and best majors are if you plan on going to law school. Let's jump right into it. Hi there, Doc from Barcast Audio here today to talk with you about what you should be majoring in if you're planning on going to law school. So one of the most common questions I get from students who are considering law school is very simply, what should I major in? And the answer is predictably complex. If you're turned off by that, maybe law school isn't for you. Everything is complex. Everything is maybe. So let's talk about some of the most common majors that I get asked about, some of the better majors that maybe aren't talked about enough in terms of going to law school. But before I get into any of that, let me just first say what I always tell every law student, and it seems a little bit maybe too straightforward for them to even consider. Study what you can get good grades in. Getting good grades is going to help you get into law schools, get into better law schools, get better opportunities, get scholarships. So if you're in a major that you think maybe looks better academically, but ultimately you're not really doing well in, think calculus, think stuff that is really challenging and is difficult to score well GPA-wise, maybe that's not the best fit for you. So doing something or majoring in something that you can score well in from a GPA perspective is really important, because ultimately and unfortunately, to some degree, you are just a number on a sheet in applying to law schools. Obviously, you have additional opportunities to demonstrate your individuality, things like personal essays, things like interviews, but for the most part, a lot of these schools are considering students purely based on their stats. That's their LSAT stats, and that is their GPA stats. So if you are considering a major, and it's between two, one where you may be able to get a better GPA and one where you're going to struggle a little bit more, keep in mind that GPA really matters in the law school process, and perhaps you should pursue something that is going to give you a better opportunity to score better and therefore have your law school application look better. One thing you have to remember is that law school grades, GPA, all of that is for the most part a marketing exercise for these law schools. If your GPA and your LSAT or your LSAT is something that the school itself can sell, can market, that is going to be an added value that you're bringing to the university. Now, if your GPA is lower, if you're somebody who's in a major that maybe is extremely difficult, that your intelligence is not necessarily going to be reflected within your GPA, that's just not something that the school will be able to market as easily. So keep that in mind as you're considering your major. With that out of the way, if I could choose one pre-law major, what would it be? First off, one of the more common majors I see from law students is political science and pre-law. Now, both of these are probably the most common major for students going into law school, and for good reason. It's going to prepare you in terms of exposing you to legal doctrine, to a lot of important political scientific history in terms of the laws and institutions of our country and of other countries, and how those things sort of intermingle. There's going to be a lot of crossover. A lot of political science programs require you to take certain classes, international law, constitutional law, stuff that will not necessarily prepare you for the rigors of law school, but at the very least will familiarize you with some of the concepts you're going to see once you actually get into law school. So political science is the always common, very common one that I see most of most law students who are coming into school. And when it comes to political science, I do think that it is a perfectly acceptable major, but, and this is a big but, I don't think that being a political science major in undergrad is giving you any sort of tangible advantage as you enter into law school. Like I said, political science degrees are a dime a dozen. I know I have one, but all I'm saying here is that it's not going to put you at any particular advantage in the same way some of these other majors might. So political science, off the board. It is worthwhile if it is something interesting to you. Don't necessarily dismiss it, because a lot of times students can score pretty well in their political science programs, and that sets them up for success as they're applying to law school. Next up, English. English is another undergraduate degree that I have that is equally as useless as my political science degree, but nonetheless, it is a very common degree that law students frequently enter law school having done some sort of English or literary undergraduate degree. Many literary majors find difficulty in getting jobs in the workforce and in the fields that sort of lead from that degree in terms of journalism and some other fields that have sort of constricted in years. So they find themselves going back to law school for a little more stability. And I think that English majors are often pushed to law school because of their ability to write, to articulate themselves really well. And I think it's a natural transition, particularly because most English majors tend to write well. And the idea is that if you write well in undergrad, you're going to be able to write well in law school. Now, I don't want to get too into it right now, but a bit of a spoiler here. I don't know that the way you write in English class, in your undergrad literary classes, is necessarily the same way that law school essays and law school writing is conducted. But I do think it's a really valuable skill, especially for the ultimate goal in all of this and going to law school is to become an attorney. And English majors tend to have a better grasp of how to articulate themselves with efficiency and in a way that is a little more coherent than students who maybe struggle with writing a little bit more. So keep that in mind. It's really useful as you become an attorney. Once again, English is a perfectly acceptable major for law school, but it's one of the more common majors we see. Pre-law, political science, English, these are the frequent flyers. So let's get a little bit outside the box here. First off, I always love when I see students who have majored in this, and that is philosophy. Now, I've made a couple jokes at my own expense about useless degrees in terms of English and political science, but perhaps there is no more useless degree, depending on who you ask, than one in philosophy. Or so you thought, or so many thought. Because let me tell you, I find in working with students, who have finished law school, who are in law school, who are taking the bar exam, students who major in philosophy very frequently have a better understanding of the gray areas that are so central to how we analyze the law. So I find that philosophy majors really get a lot of added value from their undergraduate degrees, particularly in being comfortable and operating in the gray areas that so define legal doctrine. So philosophy is a major to keep in mind if you're considering majors and you're planning on going to law school, not just because it gives you what I think is one of the more useful translative skills, but also because it is a major that allows students sometimes to score better than some of their counterparts in physics or more, I would say, difficult scientific or mathematically inclined majors. So keep that in mind, philosophy. If it is something that interests you, it could be very useful in preparing you for a law school career. Take that, all those dads of philosophy majors who may be judging them unfairly. Let's move on now to mathematics. Mathematics, I think, is incredibly underrated as an undergraduate degree for those pursuing law school. The problem is that so many of these mathletes, so many of these gifted mathematics students find that they can make money easier doing something better or more fun than being a lawyer, so they may not end up in law school. However, if you are somebody who's dead set in law school and you're somebody who is good at math, an undergraduate degree in mathematics can be very helpful because, as I referenced before, for the most part, the word problems, the hypos, the essays that you're going to be doing in law school are much more similar to a math problem than they are to an essay that you would do in like an English class or an essay writing class. And the reason for that is pretty simple. The hypos you get in law school are a lot like a word problem that you might get in a math class, or like we got in high school math, geometry or algebra, whatever it may have been. The word problems where you need to show your work. And for the most part, students who are well versed in this area, students who are comfortable not just demonstrating that they can reach the right conclusion, but that they can show their work and apply a formula to reach a correct conclusion, that is a transferable skill that I think really, really helps law students. Because ultimately, that's how students score well in law school. It's not showing off their flowery language. It's not demonstrating what a great writer they are on these essays. It's applying the formulas as defined by law to a set of hypothetical facts, and doing so in a way that demonstrates both their knowledge of the law and allows them to reach the correct conclusion. So I always say law school essays are more like math problems than they are English essays. So somebody who majors in math is setting themselves up for a more successful law school career in many ways. It provides you a tangible skill that I don't necessarily think a lot of the earlier degrees I talked about are going to provide you coming in. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more of these videos. Be sure to check out barcastaudio.com, whether you're preparing for law school or you're in law school. If you are preparing for law school, we do law school consultancy services. We do law school 1L coursework. Anything you need, we have it at barcastaudio.com. Until then, I'll talk to you guys soon now.